Hello, beautiful artist. Are you getting ready for Christmas? Well, this video is gonna get you in the mood. I'm releasing a Patreon-only lesson from my Patreon page that I'm now sharing here on the Monet Cafe channel, my Christmas gift to you. Now, I did have another video here on the Monet Cafe channel where I created all of these cards in watercolor, and I will provide a link to that lesson in the description of this video post. Now, in this lesson, you're going to hear me addressing my patrons from my Patreon page. And again, that's because I'm sharing this video complimentary here on the Monet Cafe channel. So just ignore that and enjoy the lesson. I'm also providing another gift to you, which are my traceables from not only this video that you're going to see here, but from my former lesson. I'll share the link where I had all of the watercolor paintings, Christmas card paintings. So you just look for a link in the description of this video and you'll be able to find all of these cute little watercolor designs. Again, my gift to you. And if you would like to become a patron to support this channel, it's real easy. It's only $5 a month. Not only are you supporting my channel to keep more free videos coming, but you are unlocking hundreds of videos. Most of them are soft pastel painting videos, but I do have some watercolor as well. And you become a part of my beautiful group of artists. I get to see your work. We do a homework album review every month where I brag on your paintings, and it's just a beautiful place to be. Oh, and I pop in once in a while too. Okay, we're really going to get to this lesson now. Here we go. This is the reference image that I used. I will include it in this Patreon post so you can follow along, and I'll include the little traceable. As you may recall from the other video, I'm using the Arteza postcards for watercolor. It's awesome. This was such a lovely ornament. I loved it. All right, so I am just kind of going back over what I did with the traceables. This little traceable you can print out, and it has a little bit of a gray outline to it, so you can use it to line up either your postcard that you get from Arteza, or you can make your own postcard size. It's 4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. And all you do is use the traceable, print it out, or you can draw this one. Okay, it's really easy. You don't have to use a traceable for these designs. But get a charcoal pencil or something that will transfer and just lightly sketch over it. And after you're done, you're just simply going to put the card, the watercolor paper or the watercolor card from Arteza on top of the design, and basically just line it up with that little very pale gray area you'll see when you print it out. And I like to tape it down so it doesn't wiggle a lot. And then I just flip it over and I burnish it, which just means to rub something like really hard. Now, this is a little burnishing tool I got with another product, but my dog chewed it up. It's very mangled. And then once you do that, you take it off and you'll have a light image on your watercolor paper, whether you use the Arteza card or create your own. This one, I don't think I did my charcoal very hard, so it's super light, but it works. Like I said, this is a super simple design. So if you haven't seen the other video, that's the one that I go over all of these products. I even talk about mixing color. And so now I am actually going to put in some masking fluid. That's one thing I mentioned in the other video and I didn't do in any of those designs. You don't have to use the masking fluid for this, but what masking fluid does with watercolor, if you're not used to watercolor, is it preserves the white on the paper. So this is a Winsor Newton masking fluid that I have. So I'm just going to add it to the little areas of the ornament where I want the highlight. Now, don't use a good brush. That was my little no-no. I have a real old brush here because the masking fluid is kind of like glue and it'll ruin a good brush. So, and don't let it dry on your brush. Try to use it while it's still very liquidy and then rinse your brush out. You can still use the brush again, but it can mess them up. So anyway, I'm just putting in the masking fluid on little areas that I see in the reference image where it's super light, super highlighted, and that's going to keep the white of the paper. And then we're going to paint on top of it after it dries. And then when it's dry and we're ready to, you don't have to keep the whole thing white. We rub off the masking fluid. You've got that nice white preserved underneath, and then you can add a little bit more, but it really just keeps it from getting too much paint on it. And again, you can simply just avoid these areas, leave them blank. It just makes it a little bit easier, and you can just paint with more freedom with the masking fluid there. The areas I've used, you can see, are anywhere I saw some light. I've got the highlight on the top of the ornament, on that little thing that's holding it, on the ornament itself, a little highlight, and some of the, looks like everything was very subdued in the background, but there's some lights and things in the background. Now I'm mixing up some cobalt blue. Now notice I love these little porcelain trays because it allows me to make a little puddle of paint and water. One of the things I learned with watercolor, or it took me a while to learn, is to let water be your friend. Don't have your paint to water ratio where the paint is so thick. We work light to dark with watercolor, which is a little bit opposite of pastel. We want to preserve that luminosity. You can always go darker. Now I'm adding a little bit of, this is called Quinacridone Violet. It's really just like a magenta. And I added a little bit of that with the blue, and I'm using this to give that three-dimensional feel to this ornament. I can see from the reference images where there are darker areas and where there are highlights. And the neat thing about watercolor is if you work while the watercolor is still wet, it all just kind of blends itself, real soft edges and everything. So I love that. I zoomed in a little bit more so you could see what I was doing, but I wanted you to be able to see some of my colors that I was mixing before. So see the reference image there? You can see that if you squint your eyes, you can see, of course, there are your really light lights, and then there's a dark area that's kind of in the middle, and it's like it's reflecting some tree branches or something like that. Just kind of keep it soft, all the edges soft and very loose and impressionistic. Now I did like this background was really dark, and I'll talk about that too in a minute. If you wanted to make it a really dark background, it's better to do that in stages, and don't use black. I end up using, like, if you look at the reference image, there's a hint of red to it. It's a really warm background, so I did go with that. I used kind of a magenta color for the background, and of course I decided to make the globe of the ornament blue rather than red. There was so much red going on everywhere else, but of course you could make it red too. I just kind of wanted it to stand out as a different color. So now you see I have just painted over some of the areas with the top of the ornament, that little holder part. And if you notice, it kind of has three sections. It has a light section on the left, a darker middle section in the middle, and a light section on the right. Now I have masking fluid, so I'm going to rub it off later. But now I'm doing kind of a little bit of a wash. This is just water. It might have a little paint in it. I actually sometimes like it when I do a wash and it has a little paint in it, because I can see where I put the water, just a real light color to it. So I'm just getting a wash that's all around some of the background there, and then I'm going to lay in some color. And I'm going to use some green. And how are we going to make a dark color? Basically, if you add complements to each other, you make a neutral color. So the green and the red are going to neutralize that color. And I didn't want it so stark red. Like I said, I'm going to darken it up, and I'm going to add some magenta to it as well. But I knew that I wanted just kind of some color playing around. So see, I'm just throwing in different color here and there. And now I'm getting a little purple. I mixed, what do you get to make purple? Well, normally you mix red and blue, but I had that pretty magenta. That magenta and ultramarine blue make a really nice purple. So I'm just kind of playing around with color in this background. And real quickly, if you're enjoying this video, look at silly me down there, would you go ahead and like this video? It's the only price of admission. And subscribe to my channel, of course, and I love to hear from you, so leave me a comment. Also, I've just started something new. It's a feature called Buy Me a Coffee. It's a way you can tip this video. There's a link in the description of this video, and a little link up here, and I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's get back to this. I want to encourage you, if you're new to watercolor, let the water be your friend. Let it flow. And also, too, like I said in the other video, don't be afraid to use the side of your brush. The point of your brush is really just for getting something specific, but typically I lay my brush more flat than I do holding it up to where there's just a point on it. And now I'm giving some of that magenta color to the actual ornament itself. Also in the other video, I talked about how color plays upon each other. Of course, we're going to be getting some of these reflections from that background color and everything that's going on around. This would look very boring if I just kept the ornament with just that blue. So that's going to give it some color interest, dimension, and just make it more fun. All right, so I'm making me kind of a yellowy green. I'm using sap green and I believe Indian yellow, and I'm keeping it loose again. Now this time I didn't do a wash, okay? If you have your paint loose enough with water, it's kind of like a wash in itself, so I kind of go back and forth with this stuff. But I wanted these branches to be really soft, and I'm getting the color in. Later I do add some ink outlines. I use my little micron marker, but I'll mention at some point, I actually kind of wish I had done this one without the ink outlines like I used for many of the designs. That makes them kind of fun and festive looking, but it looks a little bit more painterly and artistic if you don't add the ink outline. So I'll show you the point to where I'm like, oh, that would have been nice to leave it there. But hey, these are easy and fun. You can do them again over and over. And like I keep saying, this would be so fun to have a painting party. I'm going to use my own video that I created. I've got my daughter-in-law coming over, and we're going to have our own little painting party where I use my video as a lesson to follow. What that does for me, it allows me to join in on the fun rather than having to teach the whole time. You know, I can actually relax and enjoy my friends and family by using this video to follow. So you may want to do something similar. Again, I have a list of all the supplies, and you can use, as I always say, use what you have, get creative. You don't have to buy a whole lot, but fortunately watercolor supplies are usually pretty inexpensive. Now that's a Payne's gray. It's just a kind of a neutral gray. You can make your own neutral color by adding 3 primary colors. You can add, well, actually you could add red, green, and ultramarine blue, and it's going to make you a nice dark. Okay, so that's a good way to create a dark that's neutral. So I'm just using it to get some contrast in certain areas, and I did switch to a brush that was a little bit smaller for this section. And gonna add me some more green, but for this green I'm gonna cool it off a bit. A lot of times when things are in shadow, the greens get cooler. So I'm just getting me some of these evergreen branches. They're usually towards the center of the branch. They're a little cooler and darker, and then they gradually, if there's a light in the room or area, they get warmer as the light hits the tips of the branches. So I'm just giving me some fun, carefree, evergreen branches, and again, those golden areas, I'm imagining them as little lights way in the background, so that's why they're going to be super subdued. Now I'm going to add you some nice Christmas music just for this section here. I'll be back with commentary when I rub off the masking fluid, and then I'm going to darken up the background quite a bit so this ornament stands out more. All right, enjoy the Christmas music. You know I'll be back. Now I'm just rubbing off the masking fluid. You can actually use an eraser for this, but you can use your finger as well. And you see how it left the white of the paper in those areas. Sorry, my rubbing's shaking my camera. And now these areas actually are, they're not white, but I wanted to make sure I had enough white of that paper to keep them looking very light. And then I'm making that little kind of glow around it by adding more of the yellow out and around the edges. And now's where I'm going to really get this background darker so that I have some contrast around my ornament. Once again, I kind of went with the idea that the background was quite warm. Probably lots of lights and Christmas presents and red packages sitting around. So, and I thought it made a wonderful contrast with the blue ornament. That's kind of why I chose the blue. blue. So again, I'm just kind of making these look like that little halo light. You know, a lot of times when you get in photography, it has those little, looks like a bloom almost of a light. And so I'm dabbing in little bits of red around areas. Red, a lot of the red is mixed with magenta, but as it gets closer to the light, it gets more warm. That's what would do. What would happen with a light, you know, is that the color would get warmer. Now I'm getting, remember how I said we work light to dark typically with watercolor? Now I know where I'm going with this, and I'm adding some of the magentas and the ultramarine blues, which will combine on the surface to make these purples. Often I like my colors to mix on the paper. I find it's a lot more interesting than just over mixing your color in a little palette and then adding it. You see how those blues and magentas are just playing around on the paper, and it's really fun and creative. Also too, when I was first beginning my watercolor, you know, journey, I got quite frustrated because I overworked things. I approached it like pastel and didn't understand some of the ways that watercolor works. We want to keep that color fresh, and we kind of do in pastel too. Watercolor can get overworked just like pastel. So I learned more of how to preserve color and let it play and leave it alone. You know, it's kind of like with pastel too. Often we fuss and fiddle with something so much that before you know it, we've got mud. Anybody ever been there? Got a hallelujah? Raise your hand. I'm raising my hand right now. So again, keeping this really soft and painterly. I'd like to do this one again and have it even more impressionistic, or maybe kind of close to this, but definitely not add the edges to it that I do in a minute. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the watercolor lessons that I bring. You know, it's kind of hard. I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining. I get so many requests. I get requests for more real time, and then I get some people who say, could you speed that up? It's a little too long. And then I get a request for more watercolor. And then I just, when I posted something about watercolor on the Monet Cafe channel, I had someone say, real bluntly, stick to pastel or something like that. So, you know, it's always a balance having to do this. But you know what I do? I like to do what I enjoy and I think would be beneficial to other artists. You know, you can't please everybody. So anyway, this was fun for me, and my point is I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And the reason I chose this over some pastel, for one, pastel postcards, those are a bit challenging to mail. You will see at the end of this and the other lesson on the Christmas watercolor cards how I share. I would still put these in a clear bag. You'll see me do that at the end of this. The ones that I get from clearbags.com, because yeah, you could address this on the back and send it off in the mail, but can you imagine all the hands that are going to touch it? It's going to get dirty. So I would still, if it's an original piece of art that you are proud of, I'd put it in a clear bag and send it. Especially, you know, I'm going to add glitter to this too, so definitely keep that so the postman doesn't get glitter all over. Now I'm adding some more of this ultramarine blue. Notice too, I don't think I've mentioned it yet here, but I did in the other video, watercolor dries lighter. So you wait a little while and you'll be like, I might need to darken that up. So you continuously are working on seeing what areas you might need to darken. And so this is really giving that three-dimensional feel to this and color interest as well. All right, where was I going with that? Well, the clear bags. So you'll see that it's probably a good idea to put them in clear bags. Oh, I know where I was. With pastels, I thought that these lessons would be easier in watercolor for all kinds of people to be able to do. People who aren't even necessarily experienced artists. I made many of these in the other videos so easy that anybody could follow. Watercolors are also less expensive than pastels, so just about everybody could go and grab a little set of watercolors and do these. So I thought these were family friendly and budget friendly and easier and more accessible than everybody going and buying pastel surfaces and papers. So anyway, there's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Adding a little bit of yellow in this. Again, remember how color bounces off of everything? So it's kind of giving the idea of the lights reflecting. Now here's where I'm adding the edges to it like I did in many of them. There was one that or maybe a couple that I didn't do the marker in the other video. One was the Christmas tree. It's very abstract. It's really just a color exploration, having fun. But this is a micron marker. It's a 0.45 millimeter marker. It's a nice size, small size to get these little edges. It's also, it won't bleed. If I add more watercolor to this, I can just paint on top of it and it's not going to bleed. I didn't do the edges of the globe all the way around or very dark. I just kept it real painterly and loose. Now, I kind of wish I hadn't done the marker on the evergreen. I wanted to give a little bit of focal interest there, but just a little bit. If you do the marker there, not much. Don't overdo it because we want that ornament to be the interest. But now you can see, oh, whoops, I forgot one more thing. I'm going to add some glitter just because I said in the other video, it might be tacky, but hey, this is Christmas time and it's all about having fun and color and glitter and sparkles and everything. So I'm using this Mod Podge. It's a craft glue. You can use it for various other things, but it works great. It dries clear. And again, use an old brush when doing this. And I'm going to add my blue first. It's what I had. I had this from when I was doing some art lessons for some younger students, and we just had some creative fun. So adding a little bit, and I'm just doing the Mod Podge on the globe. Again, I want the ornament to be the interest. Now I'm adding a little bit of that magenta color, and then you just tap it off, and voila, you've got a sparkly Christmas ornament. And here are the clear bags, and these are the perfect size. You can see it listed there in the little type for fitting these postcard sized watercolor paintings. You could do this in pastel. You guys know you can take this watercolor paper, you can make your own pastel surface with clear gesso, and you could send a little pastel painting this way. I'd make it a little more sturdy though. I hope you enjoyed this release of one of my exclusive Patreon lessons. Again, find a link for the free traceables in the description of this video, along with the other full lesson with all of these paintings. And please become a patron of mine if you like. It's only $5 a month. It supports this channel and it helps me to keep bringing free content. All right, everyone, as always, God bless, Merry Christmas, and happy painting.